I grew up in a culture that was very verbal and argumentative. We had a saying, 10 Jews, 11 opinions. That was part of the culture. There were constant good-natured arguments around the table with friends and relatives and parents. But I think in addition, the 1960s seemed like a time when everything was up for grabs. You could ask questions like, could we have a society without money? Do we really need the government? Will cash be obsolete? Could we outlaw war? Questions that seem to hark back to the Enlightenment, when you had thinkers trying to rationalize the very basis for society. In the 60s, it seemed to be okay to ask those questions again. I wasn't part of the 60s movement. I was too young, but it filtered down to my circles because we had older brothers, and you read about it in the papers and saw it on TV. So it was just a time in which everything seemed up for grabs. People often ask me how my parents influenced me, and I can't give a neutral answer to that because I'm very much influenced by a saying by Hans Eysenck that the biggest influence that parents have on their children is at the moment of conception. I think that the people often attribute far too much to parental upbringing. There's a fair amount of data from my field that not widely known that suggests that the effect of parents in shaping intellect and personality might even be overrated. I mean, you see this in children of immigrants. Even if their parents never acquired the language and culture of the adopted country, as long as the kids were immersed in a peer group, they end up as fully competent citizens. Something indeed that happened to my own father. The children of immigrants who are culturally utterly inept never managed to speak the language. In the case of my grandmother, were constantly at sea in figuring out the culture, and my father grew up highly successful. So if you would ask the question of him, how did your parents shape you? He would have laughed. He shaped himself. I don't want to deny credit to my parents, who brought me up in a rich and stimulating household, but I think I'd be kind of inventing a novelistic autobiography, which is, I think, what most people do when asked, how did your parents influence you? That having been said, it was a house with books, with discussion, with arguments, with people coming in and challenging us with interesting ideas. So I wouldn't have traded it for anything, but the scientist in me warns against my own tendency to tell a story and how it explained who I am today. I think it's more being immersed in the world of ideas in general. One thing that my parents did that did influence me was buy an encyclopedia, which I read almost cover to cover. They also subscribed to many magazines, which I would devour. I think most people, even though it makes a good novelistic story to hold up a role model or a mentor or an influence, I would have to say that it was just immersing myself in a huge sea of ideas that led me to my current worldview. There are some things that were influential at different parts of my adult professional career. I was certainly influenced by Noam Chomsky, my former colleague at MIT, and by a number of the founders of the so-called cognitive revolution in the 1950s. George Miller, Jerome Bruner, Roger Brown, who was one of my graduate school mentors, Herb Simon and Alan Newell, Marvin Minsky, the people who first came up with the idea that thinking is a form of information processing or computation, almost allowing us to get a grasp on one aspect of the mind-body problem. How could a physical device result in intelligence? Probably the other major influence was from evolutionary biology, from the founders of the revolution in evolutionary biology that took place in the 1960s, people like Robert Trivers, George Williams, John Maynard Smith, William Hamilton, who rethought the nature of evolution and how complex adaptations could arise from the process of selection among replicators, namely genes. It's natural to credit who you are with your parents. It seems like an act of decency or gratitude. And in fact, I often have to apologize to my parents saying, I really do appreciate everything that you did to me. It's just that the scientific data lead me to think that parents don't shape children as much as most people think. And their attitude is, I should give them credit for their attitude, which is, we would want you to say anything but what you believe based on the best scientific evidence that you take seriously. So don't try to fashion your answer to flatter us. I think that is a sign of the kind of people that they are. They are, I think, as interested in ideas and in providing good reasons for your ideas as I am. I don't know whether I inherited that, whether they fostered it in me, but they deserve full credit for that, even if perhaps by the standards of their friends, I seem to be denying them credit in talking about theories of the shaping of personality. I remember my mentor, Roger Brown, once saying, he was one of the founders of the study of child language acquisition, which is what a lot of my own research has been focused on. And he said, you know, you'll never really understand what children are doing. This was a bit of an ironic comment, because of course that's what he spent his life doing and what I've dedicated much of my life to doing. But it does offer a little bit of humility. And a feeling that if you don't quite understand everything that's in your data, you shouldn't feel too bad about it. It's extraordinarily complex. We're fortunate to understand what we do understand. I've gotten advice on writing from an early editor of mine who said, when you try to present science to a wide audience, don't feel that you're writing for truck drivers or chicken pluckers. They probably realistically won't buy your book. And if you try to aim at everyone, you'll end up talking down or condescending. Write for your college roommate, someone who you respect as being as smart as you. They went into a different line of work. They're joining the conversation late. They need to be brought up to speed. But assume that your audience is as intellectually engaged and as smart as you are. That was terrific advice, both for teaching and for writing and speaking for a wide audience.